Hey, welcome to World Entertainment, and it looks like the third movie in the 28 Years Later series ain't happening. Now, this should be absolutely no surprise to anybody. Even the people who were jumping to its defense saying, but it's been greenlit. Yes, it was greenlit. But when the second movie absolutely tanked at the box office, yeah, you want to pull the plug on it because the first movie didn't break even. And your second movie didn't even come close to breaking even. Yeah, you don't go for the third attempt. But let's have a look at this anyway. And people will jump in probably in the comments. Hey, the first one did break even. It didn't break even. So let's have a look anyway. So 28 Years Later opened to rave reviews last year, but only made a so-so $151.3 million worldwide on a reported $60 million budget. The movie was held by 28 Days Later director Danny Boyle, and he passed the torch to Nia DaCosta for 28 Years Later to Bone Temple. Now, before we go on, the budget and the marketing costs, we know what the marketing was as well. It needed to make roughly $155 million to break even, and it didn't do it. So that's where the first issue came from. The sequel was similarly praised, and for many was an even better movie than Boyle's effort. It ended with the return of Cillian Murphy as Jim, setting up Boyle's planned third chapter, likely revolving around him and Alfie Williams' Spike. The filmmaker has said from the start that the treacle wasn't a sure thing. Now, the Bone Temple making a mere $57.6 million on a reported $63 million budget. It's hard to imagine Sony allowing Boyle to conclude his trilogy when there's a good chance it will flop, even with Murphy in a starring role. Here's the thing to keep in mind. Again, we talked about marketing with the first movie. $63 million budget for the second one. $63 million, okay? Know what the marketing budget was for that movie? $70 million. They managed to spend more on the marketing for Bone Temple than they did the actual movie. So that movie needed to hit well over $150 million, and it didn't even come close to making $100 million. So both movies were pretty out there and didn't really have much in common with 28 Days Later, a fairly traditional zombie survival thriller. It still had something to say about humans being as monstrous as those infected by the Rage virus, but these follow-ups went to some weird, non-mainstream places. Jimmy Savile-inspired ninjas, for example, which, yeah, that was the moment that I think a lot of people went, yeah, I'm good with Bone Temple. When that ending happened, it was in like the 28 Years Later, it was so jarring. You were just sitting there when it happened. I was like, what just happened? Why did this thing just turn into bloody Power Rangers? What's going on? It was so out of left field. It was like, that is insane. So that likely goes some way in explaining the drop in box office takings from movie 1 to 2. And a new report from World of Real suggests that we've heard about Sony greenlighting the treacle may not carry as much weight as you'd think. According to the site, this is the site now, I've heard from two separate sources that Sony is in no rush to make the trilogy capper happen, despite announcing it last December. In fact, I've heard Netflix has shown some interest in acquiring the sequel, but Danny Boyle isn't having any of it. He wants a theatrical release for the final chapter, which is supposed to star Cillian Murphy. So 28 Years Later and Bone Temple were pretty much shot back to back, meaning at least one sequel was always guaranteed. Even Murphy might not be enough of a selling point for Sony at this point, giving the diminishing returns from that second chapter. And it's worth noting that the movie's official social media accounts are now billing the Bone Temple as the ending you've been waiting for. That may be a reference to Murphy's cameo or an indication that for now the horror franchise is once again comatose. Yeah, it by all accounts, the movie's not happening. And we were saying this when the Bone Temple came out, and we were starting to see how bad the box office was, because it opened piss poorly and then it cratered in the second week. Before the second week, actually, when it hit Monday, it cratered. Like, it cratered in the Monday. It was under $1 million on the Monday, and then it was going down each day, and it was like, oh whoa, this is insane. And this again was a movie that even people who said, oh yeah, 28 years later was a letdown, they even came out of that one going, you know what, this one was actually a decent movie and we recommend it. Nobody cared. Nobody went to see it. So the fact that you put 63 million into the Bone Temple with a ridiculous 70 million in marketing, and you couldn't even make 60 million at the box office, yeah, that's insane. And they pulled it early. I think after 35 days, they pulled it and dropped it on video on demand. So that tells you everything you need to know. Why would Sony then turn around and go, okay, here's another 60 odd million to make a third one? They're not going to do it unless they turn around to Danny Boyle and say, can you make this movie for 20 million? And he would probably say absolutely not, because it'll probably cost them 20 million just to get Cillian Murphy. It's like, okay, well, we're not giving you any more than 20 million. And the irony is, when you look at these movies, you don't know where those budgets are. It's like, you're literally just out in fields. Like, where are you spending this money? And then the marketing cost for especially Bone Temple being 70 million. I barely seen that thing being promoted anywhere. 28 years later was everywhere. I saw posters for that thing everywhere. TV spots, you name it. I saw that thing everywhere. Only place I saw Bone Temple was on YouTube. That was it. It was nowhere. So how did they spend more on the marketing for that one and actually showcase it less? That's insane. Could have been worse, I suppose. Imagine if they promoted that at a Super Bowl. That would have been an extra 10 million. Good God. But yeah, with how it's gone, we were all saying, yeah, especially after 28 years later, like when that actually underperformed at the box office, it was like, yeah, I don't think you're going to get 3 movies out of this. And then after, of course, the next one absolutely cratered, it was like, yeah, you're definitely not getting the third movie. And now, clearly, you're not going to get that third movie. Sony are like, yeah, no, we're not spending on this. And the fact that Netflix are like, we'll buy it off you. And Danny Boyle is like, no, you won't. Yeah, it's done. It's not happening. And why would they risk it? It's not worth the risk. Again, unless they can make it for next to nothing, it's not worth the risk. But what do you guys think? Are you disappointed that there won't be the third movie? Did you see the second one and did you enjoy it? What do you think of the 2 of them back to back? Let me know what you feel about it all in the comments. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.